What's up, everybody? Gonna try another rando chat here, only gonna actually be rando. The idea being I watch news shows all the time that are 1 or 2 minute segments and then on to another subject, and it works. But instead of talking about clown world out there, we'd be talking shit. Pretty much the same difference. I always have a bunch of cool stuff that doesn't make it into the video, so we'll just do short attention span theater with it. Like when I was looking into the underworld on the maps of Iceland, I stumbled across this sculpture, and I've always heard the name pronounced Rodin. It looks like Rodin. Same guy that did the Thinker statue, which we'll talk about in a second. The sculpture is based off Dante's Divine Comedy. It's 18 feet high, 12 feet wide. This sculpture was commissioned by the Directorate of Fine Arts in 1880, and they asked Rodin for an inviting entrance to a planned decorative arts museum, with the theme being left to Rodin's selection. So they're just wanting a door for their fancy museum, and Rodin gives them the gates of hell. But this has really been the case all throughout history. If you want the best, then you got to deal with the man. Masterclass artists don't fall off the tree every day, and they know it. The Renaissance masters, who were heavy into the occult, would be commissioned works by the church, and they'd say, well, okay, I'll do it, but I'm doing it my way. Pope Paul III commissioned Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel, and he too chose scenes out of Dante's Divine Comedy. When he came to assess the progress, his prudish master of ceremonies, Biagio da Cesena, tagged along. Appalled by the nudity all around him, Biagio remarked that the decorations were more fitting for a brothel than the Pope's private chapel. You can see my video on how that actually used to be the case. In retaliation, Michelangelo depicted Biagio himself as Minos, the sentencing judge of hell. His tail, in the form of a giant serpent, coils around his body and gnaws at his genitals for all eternity. That's awesome. Horrified, Biagio begged the Pope to order its removal, to which Pope Paul replied, "Messer Biagio, you know that I have from God power in heaven and on earth, but my authority does not extend into hell, and you must have patience if I cannot free you from there." If you're hanging out with the Pope and you're the one that's considered prudish, you're probably not making too many friends. And actually, I've heard that the Pope's Triple Crown is meant to signify sovereignty over heaven, earth, and hell, which is kind of a whole new level of hubris. Anyway.
Did you know that your whole idea of hell is less than 500 years old?
That came out a lot cooler than I thought it would. But yeah, this was painted 500 years ago, and they're still using the ancient Greek mythology. That's Charon, also known as the ferryman, who ferries the dead across the river Styx to the underworld. Not to go off into it, but they were still all Roman in the 16th century in Italy. But our whole concept of hell has been created in the last couple hundred years. Can you burn an angel? Sounds like a cheeky question, but it has some meaning to it. So check out this video if you're worried about burning in hell. Okay, so Rodin's Thinker statue. The guy sitting there thinking. You got it pictured in your head? Is his hand on his chin or his forehead? Well, it's on his chin, of course. But that's not the way I remember it. And a lot of people remember it different. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard about this, but it's called the Mandela effect, where a whole lot of people remember a lot of things being one way and they're different now. I'm not going into all of it. This is just because the gates of hell were made by Rodin. But I remember me and all of my friends with our fist on our forehead mimicking this pose because it was so awkward. If it wasn't so awkward, it wouldn't have been so memorable. But as kids, we'd laugh and strike a pose about it, and this is kind of like if everybody today remembered dabbing with one hand facing down. Well, it wasn't as popular as dabbing, but we all knew it. Anyway, there's a lot of them. If you haven't heard of the Mandela effect, you can look into it.
Shut up, Static.
Over in Spain, we got a meteorite coming in hot, turn the night to day. And this shot is awesome. Check this out. You can see the bow shock. Watch the front edge of this thing. It's just flat. It's like it's hitting a wall. The front edge of that is just blasting through the air molecules, creating friction. And a very high percentage of these all airburst. People tell me all the time I'm naive for thinking that space rocks fall to Earth. Meanwhile, there's people that's all they do is go out and find these meteorites. Some of them are worth tens of thousands of dollars. So, got an interesting shipwreck here, way deep down. And this is believed to be the world's oldest intact shipwreck. The 75-foot-long, almost completely preserved shipwreck was discovered 1.2 miles below the surface of the Black Sea. This is the first of its kind ever discovered, and they believe that it is the same as what's on Greek pottery, like the siren vase depicting Odysseus in the Odyssey. This vase, officially 480 BC, is depicting Odysseus bound to the mast of his ship in order to stop himself from falling victim to the siren song. I think his crew plugged their ears with wax, and I can't remember why he wanted to hear the siren song. They say this is a very ancient Greek sailing vessel. Like I pointed out in the last Rando Chat, they find ancient wood samples all the time, and every time they tell you how rare it is. But when wood gets suddenly submerged, it lasts for a long time. They said something that got my attention, though, is the ship is so deep underwater that the oxygen levels are too low to sustain any marine life. Well, isn't water H2O? I never thought too deep into it, but I know from people around here, if you put a whole bunch of fish in a tiny pond, they will suffocate due to a lack of oxygen. So I looked this up, and they say that, yeah, it's H2O, but the fish don't use that to breathe. They use the excess oxygen from high barometric pressure forces. Sorry, but I'm not buying this at all. I haven't sat down and thought too deeply into this, but you're telling me that the less dense oxygen in the air is forcing its way into the denser water? I'm not buying it. There's something fishy here, pardon the pun. I might make a video about it if I go deep down the rabbit hole, but for one thing, you use these paddle wheels at fish farms to aerate the water. So I would think that rain would be much more likely to carry excess oxygen into the water. And I could probably go on for 10 minutes thinking this out right here, but let's just move on.
Shut up, Static.
So you're looking at just one of many prototype hydrogen-burning engines. They're only prototypes because they refused to mass produce them. But firms have now created a new prototype of hydrogen engine producing more than 400 horsepower on a 2-liter engine with 295 foot-pounds of torque. So we're talking Dodge Charger, Ford Mustang output here. It is lightweight and fit with direct injection and depends only on pure hydrogen gas. That, yes, can just be made from straight water. If we actually wanted to, in the next 10 years, which is about what it took to put in all the infrastructure for our cellular networks, we could have hydrogen-burning engines generating electricity from microstations all around the country. And we would be 100% green energy independent. And everyone could be driving around in cars that burn water. But instead of producing hydrogen Toyota Camrys by the millions, they're going to produce supercars for people that fly around in private jets and say, you're destroying the planet. They pay people to create problems, not fix them. They're called politicians.
Shut up, Static.
Scientists discover hidden planet buried under Earth's surface. New research has pointed to fascinating findings close to the Earth's core, which experts are claiming to be remains from an ancient planet. The planet, named Theia, could have collided with our planet billions of years ago, and evidence of this event is supposedly found within 2 blobs far beneath the surface. Seismic images of Earth's interior have revealed 2 continent-sized anomalies with low seismic velocities, known as the Large Low Velocity Provinces. This actually isn't a new discovery. This has been known about since the 80s, and I've heard a lot of different theories about this. All they really know is that when they measure seismic waves, it's more dense down there, so they travel more slowly. But this is the first time I've heard them suggest this was an ancient planet. They are huge, the size of entire continents and around twice the size of the moon. And this study argues that they are actually the remains of Theia, which collided with Earth billions of years ago, of course. This collision caused the creation of the moon, and the new study argues that the planet was absorbed into the Earth and formed the LLVPs. The LLVPs are often interpreted as intrinsically dense heterogeneites and are compositionally distinct from the surrounding mantle. Okay, so are they often interpreted as plagiarism as well here? Anybody with me on this? Well, that's all they say in that article. They say this is a new scientific theory, but let's go back to the 70s and Zachariah Sitchin, where he theorized that Nibiru collided catastrophically with Tiamat, where this collision supposedly formed the Earth, the asteroid belt, and comets. Sitchin states that when struck by one of Nibiru's moons, Tiamat split in two, then on a second pass, Nibiru itself struck the broken fragments. One half of Tiamat became the asteroid belt, the other half Earth, and another massive piece eventually formed the moon. Okay, so that's Sitchin's theory from back in the 70s, whenever it was. And this article from 4 years ago is claiming, today scientists say that 3.5 billion years ago, a bazillion years ago, when our solar system was nothing like it is today, a planet the size of Mars crashed into another planet, forming the foundations for Earth as we see it today. So are quackademics now backing up Sitchin's theory and just throwing a 3.5 million year date on it? Which, by the way, Sitchin put all this together through the ancient mythologies, saying that the gods in heaven were literally fighting each other, and we have all this mythology that describes what happened. But you're never going to hear anything about that out of quackademia because, like the hydrogen engine, they don't want the answers out there. They've convinced everybody that the culture that gave us art, architecture, poetry, music, culture were all just a bunch of idiots when it came to the past. So I'm going to leave you with this. Do you guys know why the Atlantis, quote, myth is so mocked and scorned? Well, I did the video about the interview with Himmler's daughter, but I think it was Goering's daughter that started talking about the Ahnenabra, which was a research institute for the Germansies. Well, evidently, they had a whole different take on human history and apparently traced the roots of the, I'm going to say, Hyperboreans all the way back to Atlantis. And when I heard that, it all made perfect sense of why Atlantis is mocked all the time. We're all taught an inversion of the truth, especially everything about that whole era. She also talked about records of when the Ashkenazi first showed up in their lands a couple hundred years earlier, just a couple hundred years. So I wonder if there isn't still existing information going back that far. Atlantis is basically a household name around the world apparently, but the only primary source of information on it is Plato. Anyway, that's why it's ridiculed by quackademia, because the only people to stand up to the beast system in recent history thought it to be real history. That's it for another Rando Chat. Just playing around with the methodology, but I think it can be a pretty cool little thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Static out.
Shut up, Static.